Hi there, I'm Luke, welcome back to Photo Bite. Today we're checking out the Huawei Mate 20 Lite. Let's get into it. So here is the Huawei Mate 20 Lite, and we have to say for what you get for under £400, we're very impressed. It doesn't have the Leica lenses that some have been hoping, but for a light phone, which is basically the bottom level, the kind of entry-level phone for its price bracket, you can't complain with the kind of features you'll be seeing out of this. So kicking it all off, you're looking at a 24 megapixel f1.8 camera on both sides of the phone, and you're also looking at a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now this is more used to pick up on what's in the foreground and background, and possibly used with AI to help get a better optical blur in the background. So we'll have a bit of a play with that, see how it works, see how it outlines different features and how effective it actually is. But overall, we're very impressed with it. It's a very fast phone. You are looking at a 3750 milliamp battery, so it's well up there with what you would normally see from a high-end phone. So it does push the boundaries a little bit more. On the front, it is pretty much the same size as the P20 Pro, maybe just a little bit taller. And when you go into camera, very fast to boot up and very easy to use. Now with the AI, it does have 22 different scenes that it can actually pick out, and then it will actually change the camera settings to make sure you get the optimal picture quality out of that scenario. So you can look at anything from food, cats, dogs, flowers, plants, people, groups, you know, you name it, this AI can really pick it out. And we've tested it and it's been quite effective in those areas. It's nice to see Huawei pushing AI even into lower spec phones, because then it pushes other phone companies to start using AI in their entry-level products. So Huawei are definitely taking the lead in AI and pushing it to its limits and making it more of an open source that everyone can get their hands on, rather than reserved for the high-end buyers that will spend a lot more on their phone to get a few more features out of it. So amongst that, there's also a HDR feature put into the phone as well. Now the idea of a HDR is called a high dynamic range image, and the idea is that you can capture things in the shadows and highlights and expose for everything without leaving anything out. So in saying that, if you were to take a selfie like this, you want to make sure that the background can clearly be seen, and if the sun's shining down as well, you want to make sure that you can be clearly seen, and that's where HDR comes in. So it would actually take a number of different pictures between the numbers of 4 and 8, sometimes more depending on the camera, and it will stack them together at different exposures to try and get the optimal picture for you. So it's very impressive if you're going out and you want to do a landscape. We can see it being used with people, although do be careful because it won't look as natural as you may like, so just bear that in mind when you are using the HDR option. So the night mode has always been very impressive with Huawei phones. We saw it in the very well received P20 Pro, so we'll be testing it out with the Mate 20 Lite and see how it performs. So Huawei have taken a bit of a different approach. They've gone with a dual camera system, but rather than a wide and a close-up, they've gone with just a standard wide, and then they've just used these 2 megapixel depth sensors on both sides to help optimize that single camera and give you better image quality out of just the one camera. So if they're doing this for the Mate 20 Lite, we're very keen to see what they do for the Mate 20 Pro. But what we'll have a look at now is we'll have a bit of a play with it. I'll see what I can do with it, and then I'll show you guys as well. So one of the main features on this is the AI mode. So this is the one that does the detection of scenarios, whether it's people, groups of people, flowers, plants, dogs, cats, you name it. It's pretty much got it pretty much has a setting for it. I don't tend to use it that much, but it's great for people who want to go out and they want to take better pictures, but they don't quite know how to use the pro side of it yet. They can start using the AI first and learning how the camera works before going into the pro mode. Now this does also have video, so you can shoot up to 1080p at 60 frames a second and 1080p at 30 frames a second. When you're at 1080p at 30 frames a second, that's when their AI image stabilization will come in. When you're shooting at 60 frames, you'll be just looking at handshake quite a bit, so do bear that in mind. There isn't any 4K on this, but for a sub £400 phone, that's partly expected. And when you go up in price towards the P20 Pro, that's when you'll start seeing the 4K video come out, and hopefully within the next few models we'll eventually see 4K being AI stabilized, but until then what you get from this phone is more than enough. So you can also shoot at 480 frames a second, which is then slowed down 16 times, so you can get some lovely slow-mo video. Now it is at 720p, so don't expect amazing image quality, but if we're going out there and just getting some slow-mos, this is a great phone to use. So one of the main features that Huawei really wanted to talk about was their selfie mode on this camera, which is also their selfie HDR mode as well. So they really wanted to push what they could do with their front-facing cameras and rear-facing for portraits. So have a bit of a play with that now. So I'm just gonna swipe up. We're gonna go into camera. I'm currently in portrait mode right now. So it's just picking up on the plant scenery around me, but if I touch on my face, it should just pick up on my face. There we go. Right, so I'm just gonna take a picture and you'll be able to see the background blur that they're using. So part of this is actually using natural bokeh blur. So they're not using any camera tricks, they're actually using the 2 megapixel camera to go out of focus and giving you that background blur. So we'll just take a quick picture. There we go, so we're just gonna look into that now. So it looks very impressive. The background blur is very clean. We'll obviously show these on the picture for you because there's quite a bit of glare out today, but you can see how it's picked up on me, worked around me, and really brought out that background blur to really isolate me as a subject. So what we'll do now is I'm just going to tap on it again. I'm going to take the beauty level down, which is one thing that some people either liked or disliked. So I'm just going to take it down, take another picture. There we go. Squinting a bit in that one. Loading up. So the background blur is completely taken out. I'm looking at this thinking, where did they find the lines? And it's normally what you would see when you start getting into this portrait mode. A lot of other cameras will tend to leave a couple of marks where they'll kind of miss out on a t-shirt, or they'll come up to the ear, they'll either take the ear out, or they'll completely go around the ear. And hair, anyone with hair that's spiked up, or even some people with long hair, any gaps between those, the camera doesn't always pick those out. So just checking out that picture, they've done really well with that. It's not the sharpest in the world because we're not looking at those Leica cameras, but for, again, a sub £400 phone, it's very impressive and you won't be disappointed. Now we're going to go over to video, so we're just going to go into video. I do notice that on the front-facing camera, it does zoom in quite a bit, so you have to hold it quite far away from you in order to get a more comfortable angle and without being too close to your face, to the point where you pretty much take up the entire frame. So holding it about at arm's length, you know, it's pretty close. It is stabilized. I do have it in 1080p at 30 frames a second, so it will stabilize it for me. If I go into 60 frames, that's where you'll start seeing the camera shake. But Huawei are doing really well with their AI stabilization. There was a bit of a hit and miss amongst people, but I think Huawei have proved themselves to be very good at AI stabilization without needing to use a gyro system. So hats off to Huawei for that one. So going back over, so I've just changed the camera over. So now I'm looking out, and again, it has zoomed in a bit. I think the main reason they've done this is when you have a big sensor and you're doing video, a video requires less resolution. So when this is being 24 megapixels, it's not going to use every single one of those pixels to actually do the video, otherwise you'll end up with a 6K image. What they'll do instead is they'll bring it down to 1080p, which only needs 2 megapixels. They'll zoom into that sensor a bit more, so they jump less layers of pixels to give you better image quality on the video. So that's our review of the Huawei Mate 20 Lite. Stay around because we will be checking out the Mate 20 Pro when it comes out in mid-October. But until then, my name's Luke, this is Fada Bye, and we'll see you next time.